Welcome to the Blind Zone, where curiosity brings its own reward. And today I have with me my new neighbor, Phil. Well, he's new to the neighborhood and I just met him. And I'm going to let you have him introduce himself very briefly. And then we're going to talk about a topic that I think is very, very interesting. So, Phil, welcome. And you want to say a few words?
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm Phil Ludke. I live next door. We've been in our new house about 6 months, and we originally moved from Roswell over here. And we're enjoying all being on one floor and a lot of a nice neighborhood to live in. Very nice neighborhood to live in. So
Yeah, I've been here since May of 19, and I can say the same thing. The one floor is very nice, the weather's great, and how we came about talking about this is I was talking to your wife, and she told me something very interesting about you, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a real thing that I'd like to explore more on the Blind Zone. She told me that you had become a Santa for hire. So, out of curiosity, how did that come about?
well, it came about for two basic reasons. Like a lot of things in your life, there's more than just one influence. In my case, I took my grandson to see Santa out in Portland, Oregon, and he did his thing. And then the Santa came over to me at break and said, "You ought to be doing this. You got the blue eyes and the beard, and it's a good job." And I didn't think anything about it. Jump ahead a couple of years. In our old neighborhood, there was a mother's group, and they asked me if I would be a Santa Claus for the children in the neighborhood. And I said, "You rent the suit, and I'll be there." About a year after that, I retired, and I said to my wife, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. And she kind of went along with me. So we started to explore it. I made contact with a professional booking agent, an agency.
Hmm.
They did all the things that you do, including background checks and where to get my hair dyed and where to buy a Santa suit. And then I attended what's called Santa School, which talks about the things you do and don't do.
Hmm.
And he started to get me, or they started to get me jobs. I elected to do home visits or single visits rather than to work in a mall. And that was just strictly a personal decision on my part. It had nothing negative or positive about a mall work. I just
Hmm. Hmm.
thought the
Hmm.
work close to children in that kind of atmosphere more suited my personality.
Hmm.
And it led to uh, almost 15 years. And at the height of it, I did about 60 uh, gigs or appointments in the course of the season. So
So were these paid things or was it out of benevolence?
no, it was. I tried to do about 10% uh, non-paid
Hmm.
work,
Hmm.
but the rest of it, no. Professional Santa Claus requires a pretty sizable investment, and I enjoyed it very much. But no, it was paid for. Stephanie ran that part of the business. She negotiated the times, and she would find out for Santa what they expected of me, so that I didn't go to somebody's home and be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I knew what I was going into, how many children were
Hmm.
involved, how old they were, and if there were any other things I should know about. For instance, were there any handicaps, children in the family that I should know, A, how to be aware of, and also know how to answer their questions in a specific way.
Well, and again, that's just the art of doing your craft well, not
Yep.
just walking and figuring out you'll handle it on the fly or because a friend of mine, she was a professional clown and she said, "Well, I went to clown school." and and I was like, I didn't know there was such a thing. And I have to say, my son, when he was looking for colleges, he said, "Well, there's the College of Mines in Colorado." And I thought he said College of Mimes. And I'm like, I think we should pick a different category for work. So he was like, yeah. But my sister, when she was a lieutenant in the fire department in Ohio, and one of her best memories was the fire department, the people in the neighborhood would get them to come by in the ambulance with the Santa, and they would dole out the gifts that they had bought for their children. And it was a community builder. And it was also a way to, to make money because, the people paid to have them come by and drop off the gifts for their kids.
Right.
And she said she really enjoyed it. So I don't know, 3 Saturdays in the month of December, they would do this. And she said it was a lot of fun, and it did build community. And I'm sure that's what you were doing also, was just incorporating some very positive things into people. And I'm sure they still remember that, to
Well,
this
you, you,
day.
you tried to always go in with enough information so that you weren't stepping on family uh, rules or traditions, but
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
sometimes you could help some of those out with a little guidance. For instance, a mother would tell Mrs. Claus, "Well, Johnny's having an awful hard time with math." Well, Santa wouldn't browbeat him, but Santa would say, "I think math is a really important subject," or whatever the thing was. Or uh, some relationship between siblings. And I was always careful because there's always an older sibling who no longer believed in Santa Claus. So you
Hmm.
try to
Hmm.
get them aside and say, now you're part of the magic for your sisters and brothers, just like they will be for, the next ones down the line.
Hmm.
And you're always careful about the environment in which you were working. For instance, I worked in a couple of churches as Santa Claus. And some of the interesting things that came out of that were, and I would never do it at anybody's home. But one particular church that I did a number of times over the years, uh, they had a uh, very large Sunday school attendance. And I had a little boy jump up on my lap, and he literally had a computer sheet in his hand, and I knew what that was in that sheet. So once again, keep in mind I'm in a church. I know this little boy is going to Sunday school, so I
Hmm.
said to him, "Let me ask you a question. Do you know the story of the baby Jesus?" "Oh yes, Santa." I said, "You know about the wise men?" "Oh yes, there were three of them." And I said, "How many gifts did the wise men bring to the baby Jesus?" Wheels went around, and he said three. And with that, I took his list and I said, "That's a very nice number." Now I have mom looking over me, looking at us from a short distance, and she's cheering because she's obviously
Yeah.
dealing with this impossible list. Not only too much money, but too much gifts. The other thing that I struggled with as a Santa was the tremendously commercialized thing of Christmas, and I was part of it. So as Pogo said, I'm part of the enemy. I had a chat with my own pastor about it, and he said, "Well, uh, would you do Santa at our Sunday children's event just before Christmas?" And I said, "I certainly would. I'd be delighted to do." And then and he said, "You do anything you want." And so I thought about it. So I walked with the musical director, and I said, "This is what I'm going to do." And because I had dealt with children, a lot of children, I developed the knowledge that children understand something if it's not quite so complicated. You're not talking down to them, you're talking with them.
Hmm.
So I took the story of Christmas and I walked up with my Bible and in my Santa clothes. I knelt at the altar where they played Little Town of Bethlehem, and I had the children sit down in front of me. And then I opened the Bible to the appropriate spot, and I held the Bible open, and I said, "Now, Santa is not really the big thing we celebrate at Christmas. What we're
Hmm.
celebrating is the birth of Christ." They mostly knew that. But they had the Bible written to them, which there's nothing wrong with, but you're reading the Bible to a 5-year-old,
Hmm.
to a 6-year-old at the
Hmm.
height.
Hmm.
So all I did was paraphrase the story of the birth of Christ at the level of a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old, and then told them to go home and have their mother or dad read it out of the Bible, which I could see the pastor in the background cheering for that. But it wasn't a put down, it was sort of a adjustment
Right, it was an inclusion
And it
because
was an inclusion, yeah.
my son's grandparents belonged to the Elks, and every Christmas they'd pick up my son and take him to the Elks, and he'd get Santa's gift and blah blah blah. Well, my in-laws were not. It's not that they were heathens, but Christmas was really about the Santa part of it.
Hmm.
And so that put me in an awkward position because I'm about the birth of Christ. And so at one point, I just had to say to my son, we can have fun with the idea of Santa. That is great fun. But the reason for Christmas is Christ came and, explained that whole thing. I said, so we're not going to devalue Christ by emphasizing Santa, but we're not minimizing Santa because he does a lot of good things too. So again, I was trying to, not push one in front of the other, but explain how sometimes they can dovetail depending on the emphasis you put on them. And so, I really do like your approach because, then this is then a number of months later, my in-laws were really big on the Easter bunny. And then I would say, Eric, Jesus did not die on the cross for chocolate. Get the Easter bunny out of your head. But again, we like to commingle things, but it doesn't have to be an either or because as you perfectly pointed out, Santa can be part of the picture because I think Santa's original intent was that he did bring gifts to people
Yes, he did.
in honor of the birth of Christ and to be helpful.
And he was called Saint Nicholas.
Saint Nicholas. So yeah, and then we morphed him into Santa Claus and again our own traditions, the Christmas tree and why we put those up.
See what I did, or what you and I think of when we think of Santa Claus, is the man in the red suit. When you put down on the sheet about your job as a Santa, you very carefully say, I am a Coca-Cola Santa. And people kind of look at you strange. But the Santa that you and I know was made popular by the arts department of Coca-Cola, the red suit and the drinking the Coca-Cola. That had been around, but they really pushed it to the forefront. And if you go to the museum in town here, you can see some of those early advertisements of Santa Claus. Now, there are some Santas who do St. Nicholas, and that involves, first of all, a green long coat, very much out of the 14th, 15th century, because that's really the history of St. Nicholas. He was supposedly a live man, and he did. He gave away gifts to the poor. He collected money or food for the poor, and he gave it away. Right. And he delivered it to the homes because that was long before shopping malls. And so there is an interconnection of it. It's gotten a little thin.
Well, because one of the decorations that I bought a million years ago, is a 3 foot tall Saint Nicholas, and he's got the long robe, and he's got the sash and the thing that hangs down, and he's got the long beard. And he's just lovely. He's really, really, he's just a really beautiful picture, I think,
Yes.
of what Christmas is. It's not the red Santa, because I remember a couple years ago when Target went through their Santa campaign, and they said, we're not going to show you what Santa looks like. And so they just had Santa's boots hanging out of the bottom of a fireplace or chimney or something. So they were trying to just not have you identify, oh, he's a white Santa, he's a black Santa, he's just a man who brings presents. And so they tried to make it more generic, I guess, so we could cover a lot more ground. But I do like the old Saint Nicholas.
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so.
How it came in. And so what would you say would be one or two of your most famous memories or impressions?
Well, the memory of doing it at church is one of them. The other ones are probably a little more humorous because you are dealing with children. And I, for instance, I always read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" and all through the house. And I had a book that had old-fashioned kind of sketches in it, and it was a big enough book. So I would hold the children are sitting here, and I've got the book open like this so they can see these pictures. But of course, I read the story so many times I didn't have to. I could just. It
I
was the
could
night
say it
before
aloud with you. It was the night before
for
Christmas,
Christmas,
went
and all
all
through
through
the
the house.
house.
Yep.
So I've got a little girl sitting right there, and children sometimes before they really learn to read, they memorize something so they can kind of fake out the other children
Read along with them.
that
Yeah.
they can. So this little girl looked up at me and she said, "Santa." And I said, "What?" She said, "You've got that memorized." Meaning I wasn't reading the story.
Yeah,
In
yeah. She
fact,
caught
I did
on.
have it memorized, but she had seen herself probably do that trick. The other one that I remember, the first year I was Santa, second year I was Santa, the city of Roswell lost their free Santa for their downtown in the square celebration. And my booking agent got me the job. And I got to ride on a fire truck, which was really neat. And I rode in, and there was at the park there, and there's a line of kids that I swear went to Marietta. I'm looking out at this line of children, and of course, the parents, as each child comes up to me, the parent of those children gets closer and closer so they can see their little boy or girl and get a picture, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I got probably about a 7-year-old boy on my lap, and he was telling me what he would like to have for Christmas. And he's just about to get off when he said, "Oh, Santa, could I ask for a gift for my uncle?" Well, you don't know, is the uncle 12 or is the uncle 40? So Santa said, "Well, I'd like to hear about it," because Santa never tells that you're going to get it. That's not
Yeah,
professional.
yeah.
I said, "Well, I would listen, sure." So now the mother she's really moved up. So the kid looks at me and he said, "My uncle needs a carburetor for his 1970 Corvette." The crowd, of course, lost it, including the mother. Well, what I figured out later was the uncle was not a young man, he was a grown man. But I'm sure he heard his uncle say, "The only way I'm going to get a carburetor for this car if Santa brings it."
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
now you always try to stay in character, but I mean, I had a very difficult time retaining my Santa, outlook on life.
Your persona of oh, that's very
Yeah, you
interesting,
have
and
to.
not just laughing along with the crowd.
That and the other one that I thought was very tender. I was doing a church, and they had a, uh, 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 a Chris scene, and they had live children dressed like the Holy Family, and they had a little crest, and then there they had a doll as baby Jesus, not a live child. So I'm in the middle of talking to this little girl, and her little sister, her little buddy, walked over and tapped me on the knee and said, "Santa, I have something for you." And of course, I turned around, and she's holding this little doll, and she said, "I've got the Christ child for you, Grandpa, Santa." Once again, you have to hold your thing and say, "Well, thank you very much, but I think we'll put the Christ child back
Yeah.
in the manger."
Let's put Jesus back where he belongs.
Yeah.
Well, because the story of, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," that was something, and I have a hardback book with that, and my son and I read that book every year, and it was Santa involved, but it was tradition.
Oh
It
yeah.
was, talking through the whole thing. So when you started that, I was like, I wonder how much I could repeat from memory, because I do say that so
And I
often.
think, in fact, I had it told to me by a couple of mothers and a couple. Remember, I did Santa so long that I ended up with teenagers that I'd had on my knees. And I had one of those teenagers, because I was there visiting her younger siblings, tell me that she got into, which I thought was very interesting. She said, "I got interested in poetry because of you." And I went,
That's a stretch. How's that happen?
because she heard The Night Before Christmas. It's all through
Mm-hmm.
the house. And somebody mentioned to her that it really and truly was a poem,
Mm-hmm.
because it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And she said,
Mm-hmm.
"I got interested in poetry. I got interested in that. And then I got interested in poetry because of how much I enjoyed that story." And I thought, well, maybe there's other stories that are in poetic form. So,
Well, but again, why you're here is because your wife made a comment,
yeah.
and then I thought, this is interesting. And we never know. The pastor of our church always says, you never know what hangs in the balance, and you never know how many lives you touch just by doing the kindnesses. Now we all know the repercussions that negative things have. But the kindnesses, we never know how that really translates and carries off with it. I mean, that just may have been something that you did that had somebody think a positive thought, even on, like maybe on a down day, they'll remember that and think, oh, yeah, that was fun. I really enjoyed when he came. And
We,
because you stayed in character and because you did your homework as well, and you didn't come in there just, I'll just wing it, because
oh
you
no,
knew what you were going to do.
you really can't wing it. And I sometimes see adults trying to wing it with young children. And because of that experience and some other experiences in my younger days, I learned quickly that if you tell children or younger people the real truth, for instance, Santa, will you bring me a puppy? And the rule is no, but you must tell the child why. In the vernacular that you're sitting there in a red suit and you travel in a sleigh. So you look at the child and you say, well, you know how Santa travels. Oh, yeah, Santa, you fly through the air. And I said, you're right. And it's very cold up there. And Santa can't bring you a puppy or a kitty or a lizard. That's something you need to speak with your mom and dad about. In other words, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sidestepping, I was putting that decision where it belonged. And the child accepted the explanation from a logical standpoint, even though we were in a little bit of fantasy land.
Mm-hmm.
And you simply
Mm-hmm.
tell them, no,
Mm-hmm.
Santa can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, also, cardinal rule, as I said before, you never tell a child, yes, you will get that. Yes, you will get that. Exception, I'm doing a job at, once again, a church, and there's two twins, boys. And I had looked in the door of the church and realized that the mother was leading the singing, playing the guitar. She was leading the carols.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think anything about it until I got the two boys up on my knee because they were twins. Mom was in, it's the lady with the guitars. So I said, what would you, if you were going to have a special gift, what would it be for Christmas? In unison, the boys said, guitars. Well, I looked out and saw, and Mom is nodding her head up and down. Jump ahead a year, same boys on my lap. I'm thinking, I remembered them because they were twins. And they said, thank you so much. We got our guitars. Well, I knew Mother was obviously involved.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, I knew exactly what was going on because there's Mom out there nodding her head, meaning,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, giving you permission to be.
yeah, she's giving me permission
Mm-hmm.
to say, well, I think that would be a good idea. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember asking for a guitar for Christmas and then thankfully not getting it because when I did take guitar lessons years later, after 3 years of lessons, I only played one song and I'd have to sing along. So you got it. So Santa was right not to give me the guitar. That wasn't going to be a useful present for me. Anyway, this has been super fun, and again, I appreciate the fact that people like you are willing
Oh,
to
certainly.
to do what it is in the community to help make things better.
Well, it's fun for me because I have such great memories of being Santa. And at my age, we decided that picking up 200 children in an hour was,
It's going to be problematic.
yes, I think I always tell my pastor it's from Shakespeare, and then he reminds me from where it is in the Bible. There's a time and a place.
That's right,
And
Ecclesiastes. Yeah, there's a
yes,
season for everything.
a
Yeah,
season for
and your
everything.
season is past on
And
that.
and sometimes it's you have to remember the good times.
Hmm.
Remember the good times.
And again, we're not supposed to do everything for as long as we think. We're
No.
just supposed to do it, like you said, for a season. And you did have great memories, and I'm
Oh,
sure that those kids will fondly remember that. And so when they go out into the big wide world, hopefully that can be something that they carry with them too.
I certainly hope so.
Hmm.
Certainly hope
Hmm.
so.
So, is there anything you want to add before we
No,
wrap
I
this
think
up?
this has been fun for me. Been very very a lot of fun. I have a question.
Sure.
Where does this go?
Well, I have a YouTube channel called The Blind Zone,
Okay.
and what's going to happen is on the day it's scheduled, and I think if I'm not mistaken, you're scheduled for December 13th. I'll send your wife a link, and then you can watch it,
Oh,
and then you can
super.
share it with as many people as you want. I've been doing this now for about a year,
Have you?
and this has been
What other
super
kind of
fun.
subjects have you done?
Oh, I've done a lot of subject. Dr. Richards from here, we did grief.
Okay.
I've done, Marianne Jones. We talked with her and Nancy Clark. I've done a lot of topics. I did a woodworker, and he showed all of his woodworking tools and the stuff he's made. I talk religion. I talk theology. It's just a wide variety of
Oh,
subjects. So, and trying to stick with the Christmas thing, I decided, you were perfect for the December slot. So again, when it comes up and it's scheduled, I'll send it off, and
super.
because I think this is going to be great. I think that this is going to be another one of the things that I was curious about. And again, it does bring its own rewards with just finding out more things about people. And
It's neat. It's neat.
hmm hmm
If you ever want to do one on jazz, I can, I, I, I can carry on the conversation for much longer than you want to know.
yeah, yeah, and just on the down low, Phil, jazz is not my thing, but I appreciate people who like it. But I may do that in the future
Yeah,
because again, curiosity brings its own rewards.
I could
And
do jazz 101. In other words,
oh yeah,
very
yeah.
simple, very within the time limits, if you so see the thing.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, because again, how these things come about. Somebody will say to me, like I was talking to Nancy Clark. We went to a woman in the neighborhood, her funeral, and she was telling me about her trip to Africa, tapestry into Africa, and I was like, oh,
oh
that
boy,
would make a great thing. And then I was talking to Mary Ann, and we were talking about her grief, and it was like, that's the path God made for you. So we made a whole thing. So they again, they just roll into each other when I find interesting things. So I'm sure I'll take you up on that, and so we'll schedule
be,
you for January so that I
be
can.
be happy to do it. And like I said, I can do it 15 minutes and keep it.
Well, you'll just have to prep me with some questions that
Oh,
aren't like quite the dunce.
that's very easy.
Now we've got off topic, but this has been
And I was,
fabulous.
it's interesting because I was supposed to be to give you a little, I was supposed to be a history teacher. And that was a mistake because what I should have been was an elementary teacher. And I took the wrong curriculum in college. And that's my excuse, by the way, and I'm sticking with it. Uh, uh, but I've always enjoyed teaching, came not naturally to me, but easy to me, which is why I said to your
Mm-hmm.
executive assistant, they brought me in to teach marketing to a bunch of kids who had a master's in it. And like any good teacher, I said, well, what's your education? And they would tell me. And of course, these are adults I'm dealing with, or semi-adults. So one of them said, well, Phil, what's your background? And I said, what's your college education? I said, well, let's see. I majored in history, I minored in biology, and I minored in music. And I mostly majored in playing music, and then I dropped out. Now sit down, take out a pencil and paper, and take notes.
Yeah, yeah.
And once again, I was a deal because I said, I will teach you marketing basically, and you're going to teach me how to run that computer that's sitting on my desk. And they all
So
went,
it's a
oh no, this is impossible.
fair trade-off. See, because I like teaching too, but I like teaching theology. I'm really good at that.
Yeah.
So now we veered off, and I fear my executive assistant is like, cut it off. We're going long.
I have my watch over here. Oh yeah, we were well within their time limit when we quit and went to a general discussion.
Anyway, so this has been great fun.
Oh,
So thank
it
you,
was.
and
Well, thank you.
and so we'll see you next week on the Blind Zone.